Equity stands at the heart of Sustainable Development Goal 4, often referred to as SDG 4, to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. As we live in a world where disparities between resources and opportunities continue to increase, equity has become more important than ever before. SDG 4's Target 5 makes even more specific references to the importance of reducing disparities so that we can increase equity. It asks countries all over the world by the end of 2030 to provide equal access to all levels of education to both girls and boys, and those that are most vulnerable, such as those from minorities, indigenous peoples, and persons with disabilities. As we look at equity and its related concepts in more detail, we need to understand what it actually means. UNESCO's definition of equity asks us to distinguish between equity and equality. This means seeing equal outcomes versus equal inputs. Equality means that there are equal inputs. For example, the same number of textbooks, uniforms, t-shirts, or hours of instruction provided to learners. Equity, however, means that there are equal outcomes, meaning that all learners will have the same learning outcomes, whether that's knowledge, skills, and abilities, which may require different materials or support for some than others. Overall, equity means that there is a sense of fairness and justice in the way that education is distributed, so that all learners can receive the same opportunities. You can see the difference between equality and equity in this image, which shows three people of different heights trying to look over the wall to a football pitch. If they are all given a box of equal size to stand on, it doesn't necessarily give them an equal chance of seeing over the wall because they are of different heights. Equity means that each person is given a size that helps them to achieve the same goal, to see over the wall. You will find this image in a worksheet for you to reflect on how this relates to your own context. Another way to see the difference between equality and equity is to see equality as the what or the state of affairs, whereas equity is the how or the process and actions required to ensure equality. But what stands in the way of equity in education, and what does it involve? Unequal opportunities, disparities, and marginalization all continue to be a barrier to equitable education, leading to a lack of inclusion. All of these are related concepts that we should look at together, such as disparities, unequal opportunities, and marginalization. But to understand them better, we first need to look at inclusion. For UNESCO, inclusion means embracing diversity through actions and processes that help to build a sense of belonging based on the belief that each person has value, potential, and should be respected. This means that rather than learners adapting to education systems should adapt to the different needs of all learners. It also means that learners with different needs can be educated together rather than separately, and that they should see themselves represented in learning materials and integrated in environments. For example, if learners are able to access education in their mother tongue, or they see images of children who look like them in their textbooks, they are more likely to feel included. But the reality is that some barriers continue to stand in the way of this. One of the barriers is disparities, which means that significant differences or dissimilarities can be found between different groups. In the context of equitable education, this can be understood as significant differences between learning outcomes, opportunities, or access. For example, male students may have a greater opportunity to participate in secondary education than female or students from other genders. These disparities lead to marginalization of certain vulnerable groups, meaning that there is acute and persistent disadvantage rooted in social inequality. Who is affected? Now that we have an understanding of the key concepts related to equitable education, we need to also understand who is most affected by a lack of equity. UNESCO identifies specific characteristics of those affected, which includes people living in remote and rural locations, ethnic minorities and indigenous groups, refugees, migrants, and those that are internally displaced, people with disabilities, gender identity and expression, religion, beliefs and attitudes, language, social status and origin, wealth, incarceration. Overall, for education systems to be truly equitable, they need to consider how they can provide the necessary support, materials, and services for those who are marginalized and most affected by disparities, so that they can access the same opportunities and achieve the same outcomes as any other learner would. Now you can take a short quiz to assess your understanding on what equity means and turn to the worksheet and reflection questions to apply equity within your context.